Okay, so this is almost the last talk today. It's almost 7, so let me try to show you some pictures and boil your blood a little bit. See your reactions. Okay, I guess that's enough. Hello everyone, I'm Jonas. I work at Blockstream in the research group, and I'm going to talk about a little project I'm working on with a few other contributors in my spare time that's called Nix Bitcoin. And the starting point for me was basically this. As we've heard a couple of times today, many people want to set up a Lightning node. Same hell for me. So I would have, if I wanted to do that, I would have had to set up another Bitcoin node. And as part of my job, and also at home, I've done that quite a few times. And if you do it often enough, it becomes really annoying. We've seen earlier in a presentation by Alekos how to do it exactly, but you should do it once and not anymore, because he didn't show everything. You may want to also set up onion services. You may have to move RPC passwords around. You may have to create additional users just for particular processes to isolate them from each other. And this is really no fun. So what people recommended to me was, hey, you should use a more systematic approach. And what I wanted was a single configuration file for a system, a text file that can be in version control. It should use abstractions to reduce complexity, like a programming language, and it should reduce statefulness, so it would be easy to maintain. So people pointed the Nix ecosystem out. And this is there are a couple of projects under this umbrella. Let's look into a few of them. First and foremost, there's Nix, the purely functional package manager. And what that means is that this package manager has no side effects. So you have a specification for how to build a package, and it will always create the same result from the same dependencies. So I'm going to show you how this specification looks like. This shouldn't be intimidating for you. If you don't understand it, it doesn't matter for the rest of this talk. You don't have to interact with it if you just want to use Nix Bitcoin, but I wanted to give you a taste of how this looks like. So this is the derivation written in a Nix expression, which is the functional language, to create the Bitcoin D package. And what this actually is a function taking arguments, which are the dependencies, for example, OpenSSL, and so on. And it returns a derivation. And it specifies that the source code must be coming from some URL with a particular hash. You specify exactly the build inputs, and you specify configure flags. And because this is a programming language, you can also include more elaborate logic, like, for example, only if the with GUI flag is set, then you include these dependencies. So you can use this Nix expression to build the Bitcoin package. Then there's NixOS. This is a Linux distribution with a declarative approach to configuration management built on top of Nix. And what declarative approach means is that there's a single configuration file where you specify how you want your system to look like. Then you run a command which takes this configuration file and builds the system. So let's look at an example. This is an example configuration Nix. Again, it's a function taking a configuration and packages. It imports a hardware configuration that's usually auto-generated by NixOS. And then you can simply say services.bitcoind enable true. And once you run the NixOS rebuild switch command, it will actually enable a systemd service that runs Bitcoin-D. You can also specify other things. For example, you can explicitly specify the port Bitcoin-D is running on, and then you can say, okay, I want a hidden service for Bitcoin, and that's then just 3 lines in this case, where you say you want to map this Tor hidden service to this particular port that you have previously set. Next piece of the puzzle is the collection of Nix packages and NixOS modules. This is a GitHub project. It's pretty transparent what's happening there. People create pull requests with new versions of packages. They get merged, and then you can easily use them. I should point out that the Nix package manager you can install on most Linux distros. And then there's NixOps, which is now a declarative tool for deploying sets of NixOS Linux machines. So how this looks like is this. You define, in the Nix expression, you define your Bitcoin node as a function, taking configuration, packages, and returning a set of attributes. In this case, you want to deploy to a virtual box. You set how you want your system to look like, and then you can create the network with this NixOps create command, and then you can deploy the network. How is this a more systematic approach? You can do the whole deployment and the update with a single command. You have reproducibility because it's functional. You will always get the same result, meaning you can also do stuff like rollbacks. If something doesn't work, you can just roll it back. This makes it easy to use if you know command line stuff, of course. And also because you have the dependencies under very tight control, you always know what you use. This also has benefits for security. It uses a simple functional typed language, and apart from the Nix stuff, under the hood it uses fairly standard Linux tools, like for example systemd services. So let's see how this how the types in the Nix expressions can actually help. So this is our example from before, where we specify the Bitcoin-D port in order to be able to use it later in the hidden service configuration. The port is of type null or an unsigned integer 16-bit. So what would happen if I would forget to set that line here? If that line would be removed, then Bitcoin-D would use the default port, but the port for Nix would be null. So this wouldn't actually be a valid Nix expression. So the NixOps or the Nix tools will immediately say this doesn't work because I need to get a port and not null. So this helps to make this helps reducing mistakes when writing these configuration files. Okay, so now back to Nix Bitcoin. What is it? It's a set of Nix packages and NixOS modules with profiles. We are going to talk about that later for easily installing Bitcoin nodes and higher level protocols. So the first thing, if you want to try this out, is you need to find a deployment target. I use this thing. This is like form factor. You see my hands. It's quite small. I think it was about $300. It's from Gigabyte, but there are many companies building these kinds of machines. Yeah, you would need something like 4 gigabytes of memory and something on the order of Intel Celeron and enough space depending on what you want to do. One of the ideas is also that you should have fun with this system, so you don't want to use a Raspberry Pi probably, because then you have to spend a lot of time trying to work around the limitations of a Raspberry Pi. There's a tutorial in the repository's README for how to deploy it in a VirtualBox if you want to try it out. And you also need a machine to deploy from. This would be your personal laptop. Right now, it must be x86 Linux. And then you can clone the project. And in the projects directory, there will be a configuration.nix file. We don't have a fancy wizard. You have to change text files. So you look into these fixmes and you basically follow the instructions. For example, you need to include your personal hardware configuration if you're not deploying on VirtualBox. You want to enable Nix Bitcoin. You want to set a profile. So right now there's the minimal profile and the all profile. The minimal profile only installs Bitcoin D and C Lightning, while C Lightning is not listening. It's only for outbound connections, and all basically installs everything. You want to define your host name. You probably want to turn off binary caches, so by default it's turned off, such that you build from source and not download it from some build server. And then you add some packages you also want in your system, like Vim, htop, tmux, or whatever. Okay, and then it looks like this. I hope it's big enough. So you start the Nix shell, and the Nix shell sets the environment variables and generates secrets if they haven't been generated before. So now we are deploying to a fresh VirtualBox. For that, we create the network with the provided network files, and we call this new network fresh deployment. And now we deploy our new network. We give it an additional flag because there are bugs in VirtualBox, and we write the output to a file and not to a standard out, so we don't see it here. Okay, done. So now we can SSH into the machine. And let's see what's running there. Okay, so that worked. So the first thing we do is the nodeinfo command. This returns a couple of onion services that are currently running on the system. So one of them is Nginx. So there's a small web page generated by Nix Bitcoin, which currently just displays your C Lightning node ID and also the onion address. And there's also a link to a little nanopos store that you can use. There's a special user called operator, which is able to access the whole system like Bitcoin CLI and Lightning, but doesn't have root privileges. So you don't have to switch users every time. There's also Liquid on the system. And Spark Wallet. Yep. Okay. Okay, back to this nodeinfo command. It's basically the first step. You can run it as the operator user. See, there's Bitcoin, Onion, C Lightning, Liquid, Spark Wallet. There's also Electris running on the system if you enable it. And there's an SSH Onion if you want to SSH into your node from outside but don't want to deal with NAT issues. Okay, so I guess Nadav is going to talk more about Spark Wallet. But the way this works is that you just look into the logs of Spark Wallet, you see a QR code, then you can I use the Android app, I scan the code, and I also need to run this additional app on Android called Orbot to tunnel the traffic through Tor. This might sound very janky, but actually it's very reliable. For me, it just works. I just checked, I've done more than 200 payments through Lightning payments through my phone already. So this mostly works, or basically for me, that's always worked so far. Interesting would be how to customize this thing. So one easy thing you can do is you can change the profile, but there's only two right now, so that's not very interesting. You can also check the available module options in the modules directory and add them to the configuration.nix. So for example, you can set specific pruning parameters. You can change the DB cache to speed up syncing. And also you can change, for example, if C Lightning should just listen on localhost or be available from the outside as well. If an option is not available, then either you need to open an issue in our GitHub repo, so we can try to add this option, or you can try to define it yourself. So let's look into the C Lightning module. This is a Nix expression, a function taking configuration, library, packages. And here it writes the configuration file. So you see auto listen is the option that defines whether C Lightning should listen or not. And that is set to a Nix expression, which says that if the configuration, if the option auto listen is true, then we put the string true there, or else we put the string false there. Then you need to define the option here. So you say auto listen is an option. It's a boolean, by default it's false, and you add a little description. And at the bottom, this basically says that if C Lightning is enabled, then you register a C Lightning service. It's spawned after Bitcoin-D. It's spawned like this, and you run it as a user C Lightning. Okay, so I started out by saying that this is mostly for us who are contributing to this project. We are interested in running our personal node, and we just install whatever seems interesting to us, but it could be a little bit more. It could be a platform where you can deploy some software too. For example, for public infrastructure or as a personal wallet. There's a lot of things we want to add, like from basic things like improving ease of use by making backups easier and updates to more security hardening, but also adding more software, for example, to improve privacy, and also hardware wallet support, hopefully with the next Bitcoin Core version. If you want to try it out, just go to the repository, follow the tutorial. It's relatively detailed. I'm also here to help, both physical and online. And also, please develop more software that we can deploy on the node. And let's do some beering later today, where we drink beer and peer our Lightning nodes and open channel and so on. Thank you.
So we will use your browser.